I had been married for 25 years and I drank my way out of that marriage. And a couple of years after getting sober and divorced, my ex-husband was getting married and I knew it was going to be a hard day for me. So I invited 3 of my best friends to meet me on a mountaintop in Colorado and I invited them to a wedding to myself. At this wedding, I made vows to myself, primarily that I alone would be responsible for my own happiness and stop seeking outside affirmations as a barometer of my self-worth.
Welcome to Project Loving Myself, the podcast where we dive deep into the messy, beautiful journey of self-discovery, self-love, and healing.
Welcome back to Project Loving Myself, the podcast that brings you back to yourself through real self-love. So many of us are taught to believe that happiness comes later, when we find the right person, reach the next goal, get the recognition, finally feel like we've made it. What if happiness is not something you wait for? What if it's something you choose to create? My guest today took that idea to heart in a bold and unforgettable way. She married herself, not because she had given up on love, but because she wanted to make a deeper commitment to herself, to her happiness, her healing, and the life she wanted to create. Joining me today is Maria Leonard Olsen, bestselling author of 50 After 50, Reframing the Next Chapter of Your Life, TEDx speaker, attorney, podcaster, mentor, and advocate for women creating meaningful lives on their own terms. Through her work, Maria helps women navigate reinvention, recovery, self-discovery, and the courage to fully show up for themselves. Maria, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Maria, I want to go right into the most interesting part of this conversation. You held a ceremony where you married yourself. What inspired that decision? What did that represent for you?
I did. I had been married for 25 years and I drank my way out of that marriage. And a couple of years after getting sober and divorced, my ex-husband was getting married and I knew it was going to be a hard day for me. So I invited 3 of my best friends to meet me on a mountaintop in Colorado and I invited them to a wedding to myself. And at this wedding, I made vows to myself, primarily that I alone would be responsible for my own happiness and stop seeking outside affirmations as a barometer of my self-worth. And what it did for me is it helped me get through a hard weekend, but also it confirmed for me what I wanted and how all of us are responsible for our own happiness. We've been sold a false bill of goods where we're told that Prince Charming will save us or that a partner will complete us, but we're all enough just as we are. And so I didn't want to buy into that narrative anymore. And I now have been divorced, separated for 13 years. I'm not planning on marrying again. I do have a partner in life right now, but we're not getting married. And I feel like in some ways, not getting married, not having the entanglements that modern marriage requires will make us try harder to be good to one another because we can each walk away very easily. We don't own property together. We each have our own houses, but we spend most of our time together.
So you're together by choice and not like through a contractual obligation, which is in many ways what marriage is. And I mean that more in terms of, legally, that's what it is. Of course, marriage can be so much more. But I do recognize that your choice was to marry yourself and then you became your own partner.
Yeah.
And what is the role of your partner then? Is it like you have 2 partners? How does this work?
No, he is added joy to my life. I travel extensively. I've been to 80 countries already, and he doesn't usually come with me on my trips. I hear friends and colleagues and acquaintances say things like, "Oh, my husband would never let me do that." Well, why do we need permission from other people? That seems so antiquated. And my partner, when I say, "Oh, I'm going to Sri Lanka for a month," I typically say, "Do you want to come?" And I know that more often than not, he'll say no. but sometimes he says yes, and that's great. I'm no longer feeling like I have to be in the traditional wife model. Yes, I'm a better cook, and yes, I do make him dinner, but not every night. And he is not assuming that any night I'm going to be providing dinner for him. And
So
we split expenses. Like if we go out to dinner, we just take turns paying instead of like nickel and diming. Well, that dinner last night was more expensive than this dinner, that sort of thing. I'm not interested in that.
So, what I'm hearing you say, right, Maria, is in doing away with marriage, the idea of marriage, the commitment of marriage, you have also done away with all the social norms, rules, obligations that usually inadvertently, whether we want it or not to, they filter into the relationship when you are married, right? So you just kind of said, well, we're not married, so none of those rules apply.
Correct. Yes. A somewhat novel relationship. And the situation where people have their own houses yet consider themselves to be together is more and more common. It's called living apart together. And I wrote an article about that for another publication. It's more common nowadays. And I think it's great that people should feel empowered to create the relationships that serve them best.
I love that. That is just such a new and almost fresh way at looking at relationships. Maria, one of the vows you made was to be responsible for your own happiness. Why was that particular vow so important to you?
Because I still am a recovering people pleaser. And I thought that if I could do great things, people would like me. And that was what I was supposed to do, to be a good girl in this society. And I don't want to buy into that anymore. I heard this great quote by Jamie Lee Curtis, the actor, and she said, "I'm no longer people pleasing, and people are not pleased." And I just love that because she's stopping. She catches herself and stops doing things just for the sake of pleasing someone else, which is what I have adopted for myself as well. And I just thought that I needed to please other people to feel good about myself, but that's not true. If I'm living a life consistent with my own values and giving back to society in a way that I think is important, then I feel good about myself and that I don't need other people to say, "Maria, you're this or that." I get to determine my own value and my own identity now.
I love that. I love the Jamie Lee Curtis quote. And of course, my brain was like, okay, people aren't pleased. And is that okay with you? So, as a recovering people pleaser, people are no longer necessarily pleased because you're not pleasing them. How does that feel?
Sometimes it doesn't feel good. I admit that. Sometimes it doesn't. And I have also learned that I can handle two emotions at once. I can feel both joy and sadness at the same time. I was incapable of that before I turned 50 and did a lot of inner work on myself. I'm now 62. And I had to learn. I had to learn that not everyone is going to like me, and I'm not responsible for other people's feelings, and I can't control, rather, other people's feelings. I can do my best to be a good person, but I no longer put my needs secondary to everybody around me. It's not the case with certain relationships. Like I'll do my best by my children or my parents when they were living, but I no longer believe that my needs are not important. I believe they're very important. And especially now that I'm actuarially speaking in the third of my life, I'm not going to waste all of my energy trying to please other people. It's more important that I feel good about me and my legacy and what I'm doing, both for myself and for the common good.
Maria, what I'm hearing you talk about is really self-commitment. So what does self-commitment mean to you? How does it show up in your life? And how is it different from self-love? Because a lot of times we talk about self-love, but self-commitment seems a little bit different.
Yes, self-commitment can be an element of self-love. But what self-commitment means to me is that I'm no longer putting my needs down at the expense or pleasing other people at the expense of my own needs. And when someone, for example, asks me if I would do something for them, I ask, or with them, I ask myself first, is this something I'm doing solely to please the other person? Is it consistent with my values? Is it bringing me closer to the person I want to be? So those are commitments to myself, that I conduct this inner inquiry before committing to something. And if the answer is no to any of those questions, I commonly say, I have another commitment. And I'm not obligated to say what that commitment is. It could be simply to recharging my own batteries. I am not required to tell everyone what I'm doing all the time. So that is self-commitment to me. Protecting my values, my energy, my time. I am very selective about who I spend my time with now. I surround myself with people who uplift me, encourage me, support me, or inspire me. And even if that means family members, I can limit my time with family members who are sort of energy vampires, just taking, and not uplifting me or giving me anything. Our society was taught, especially in my generation, to respect our elders and to subjugate your own needs for your husband or whatever. But I don't do that anymore. I really don't.
What I understand now is self-commitment is like the antidote to people pleasing, right? So for a recovering people pleaser, for anyone out there who is a people pleaser, why not try self-commitment instead? And I feel like asking those questions that you ask yourself, is this something that I'm doing just to please somebody else? And you had a second question that you asked yourself as well, like maybe just doing that quick checklist in your brain before saying yes to somebody else is a way you reaffirm your commitment to yourself. And as you continue to commit to yourself, you people please less and less because you start choosing yourself a lot more. That sound about right to you?
Yes, I completely agree. And the other questions were, is this consistent with my values? Is this bringing me towards my goal or who I want to be?
Love it. Love it. Now, Maria, so many women spend years and years waiting for a relationship, an achievement, or some kind of circumstance to make them happy. And it's always something external that almost gives us permission to be happy. Why do you think we fall into that pattern? Where did we all learn that?
Yeah, it's social conditioning, and it differs among various cultures. When I grew up with my Filipino mom, she was always bothering me, pestering me to marry a doctor. And I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to just marry a doctor. I'm going to marry someone I love. And it really doesn't matter to me so much what their occupation is. So we're conditioned by the media, by our family, by societal messaging in various ways. And then as adults, throughout our lives, it's our job to parse through what fits for us. And I believe it's one of the gifts of aging that we tolerate less of people telling us what we have to do. And we stop shoulding all over ourselves as we get older, typically.
So what changed for you, Maria, when you stopped looking outside of yourself for that sense of fulfillment, when you stopped responding to society's conditioning, let's say, and you just started showing up for yourself the way you wanted to?
Yes, I feel so much better about myself. I sleep better. I don't sweat the small stuff anymore. I'm living a life I designed for me that really brings me joy and serenity. Happiness for me has changed, the concept of happiness after 50. Happiness for me in my younger days meant being invited to the best parties, going to the best events. But happiness for me now means I can look at myself in the mirror and feel good of what my day consisted of. Or I don't have any secrets which were keeping me sick. I don't cross the street when I see someone coming because I've made amends to anyone I have harmed in my past. I'm living a life that I'm proud of now.
Let me pause here and give you something I made for you. Most of us were never taught how to check in with ourselves, what we need, what we're feeling, or what we've been quietly carrying. That's why I created 99 self-love journal prompts to do some of that asking for you. They're simple questions to help you slow down, hear yourself more clearly, and come back to what you need, one page at a time. Grab your free download through the link in the show notes. Okay, now back to it.
It sounds like there's just a deeper sense of peace and fulfillment.
Yes, there is.
Maria, you said, when you're younger, it was about the best parties and, the best of like what, everything outside of you, right? Now, you also talk about becoming your best version. Maria, how is being your best version different from trying to be a better version? So what does that mean, best versus better version of yourself?
Well, I have a podcast called Becoming Your Best Version. And in that podcast, the last question for all my inspiring guests is, what do you do to become your best version? And I have been doing the podcast for 6 years weekly, and I've never received the same answer. What best version means to me, I drew it from, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, right?
Yeah.
So one of the four agreements that he advocates is to always do your best. And your best may differ given your circumstances on any given day. But I strive to do my best in all situations and cognizant of the fact that my best may differ depending on how much sleep I've gotten, etc. So I'm continually striving to become my best version before my time is up in this life. And what that means is in the morning, I am intentional about how I will spend that portion of my life. Every day, I'm intentional. And at night, I take inventory about how the day went and what I did and what I feel good about, what I could improve upon. So for me, it's important because I am so aware of time, my lack of time, and how I only have on average maybe 30 more, not even 30, 20 more summers left. What do I want to do with this summer? Because it's dwindling. And so I'm just cognizant of the arch of time. And so I don't waste time anymore. That doesn't mean I never rest, because rest is important. But I'm always looking for, what do I want to do with my life before it's over? And at this age, we've all lost someone close to us before we thought we would.
Yeah.
And so I feel the imperative now.
Now, a lot of times where we trip up with being our best version is the outcome doesn't always show up the way you want it to. So you may have done your best, but then, the result is disappointing, or somebody else is not happy with what you did. How do you deal with those kind of situations when you've done your best, you have done the best you could given your circumstance, and yet it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to?
Right. Well, disappointment is a part of life. And what I have learned is to sort of wear life like a loose garment and to ride the waves of emotion and to try to be like water going through rocky areas, that I adapt and I learn from my mistakes. I don't just say, oh, well, I try to learn the lesson, and every person and situation has the ability to teach us something if we're open to the lesson. So even if I'm stuck in a boring meeting, I'm trying to listen for what the message is. Sometimes the message is, Maria, you have to work on your patience. Patience is in short supply for you these days. So I'm always looking for the message, and I journal frequently. I do a lot of meditation about my life and my emotions, and I just try to strive to do better next time. So yeah, not everything is going to work out for any of us.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess we just have to learn to be okay with that. Now, you've been through a lot of interesting experiences yourself, Maria. You've walked through sobriety, which you mentioned, reinvention, career success, personal transformation. How did those different experiences in your life either help you commit to yourself even more, or perhaps challenge that self-commitment? What was that journey like?
I have had a lot of life challenges. I mean, harder ones that you didn't mention were I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse and I was raped as a teenager. But what I've done is turned all of these experiences, negative and positive, into a force for good. I actually did a TED talk called Turning Life's Challenges into a Force for Good. I use my experience, strength, and hope to help other people now. I'm a frequent public speaker on these topics. I write about these topics. And so while I am not happy that these things happened in my life, I'm using them to make a difference in other people's lives. And I practice generosity towards myself, which was not something I did when I was younger. I thought many of these things were my fault, or I attracted this negative energy into my life. And maybe there is an element of the law of attraction at play for bad things that happen in our lives. But it does not lessen my commitment to myself. It helps me practice self-compassion that, yeah, these were hard things, but it doesn't keep me down and I don't dwell in it anymore. I have suffered from debilitating depression a couple times in my life. So I know that dwelling in those thoughts and in negativity doesn't serve me. So I think, what can I do to either practice self-care in those moments, or more often than not, it's getting outside of myself to help someone else that is an antidote to self-pity.
Maria, I often think that a lot of the challenges that we go through happen because we're meant to grow, but also because we're meant to help other people with those similar experiences. And in a way, going through them ourselves makes us more sensitive to other people's needs, more equipped, perhaps, to help other people. Tell me your thoughts about that.
Oh, absolutely. I am a mentor to women in recovery. And if you're familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a sponsor to women in recovery. And if I didn't have these experiences, they would not think I understood their challenges. But for every experience that they relate to me, I'm able to relate back and say, well, that happened to me too, or something similar happened to me. And this is how I get moved forward. This is how I practice self-care. This is how I regained my confidence and strength to overcome that difficulty. So I absolutely believe that I needed to have certain experiences in order to help others. I once spoke on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on ending rape culture in our country. And I talked about my own rape. And after I got off the stage, these young women surrounded me and they said, I can't believe you said that in public. I haven't told anyone that I was raped. And I said, look, I couldn't do it when I was your age, but now I want you to know you're not alone. And so many people's suffering is eased by knowing that they're not the only one.
Yeah, I think when we, speak about something that has happened to us and we share it with other people, we almost give them permission to see and process what they've been through and not to be ashamed of it. So I think that's really powerful. Is there a specific practice, Maria, that you feel has really helped you process the different challenges in your life? Something that has maybe helped you during your darkest times that you could share with our listeners today?
Yes, I have tried many, many different things. And I think it's a combination of these things that really helped me. I believe that traditional talk therapy was important in my healing process. And I believe journaling and meditation really helped me. But after I went through all of these different modalities, right now, what is helping me the most is somatic healing. And that involves a lot of breath work and meditation. And I believe it is sort of next level, though. It's not something that you should jump into if you haven't already done some of the less involved healing modalities or traditional talk therapy, because it really, really brings up deep emotions. And if you're not adept at handling deep emotions, it can really cause a setback or worse. So,
Yeah.
I had to learn through traditional therapy, something called dialectical behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, how to deal with big emotions because I was not adept at that for a long time. And I learned how to ride emotions like waves. Most emotions, if not all, don't last more than a minute and a half. So if you know that it's to be true, you can look online for medical studies on this. If you feel something really hard, really strong, breathe through it and know that it will dissipate after 90 seconds. And that might give you enough confidence that you can make it through that.
One of my mentors told me, Maria, that every emotion just needs to be experienced. So as long as you kind of go into the emotion being like, this is what I'm feeling right now, and I just need to experience it fully, that whole minute and a half, let's say, and just feel it and then get to the end of it, then it doesn't get sort of lodged or trapped in our body as something that wasn't experienced or processed. And I remember that felt really empowering. And it's something that I share with other people too, that our emotions are just there to be experienced and experience them and let them just appear and allow yourself to go through it. So when you talk about the waves of emotion, that makes total sense, that it is a wave and you just have to ride the wave all the way through until that wave comes down. So such a beautiful way to approach emotions. Now, for someone who's listening in, who keeps waiting for the next goalpost, for life to get better before they finally allow themselves to just be happy, what would you want them to know?
Well, when I was in one of my deepest depressions, my therapist had me write down a list of things that brought me joy. And at the time, I couldn't think of anything except my children. And she said, no, 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 that can't be true. Like, start small with a sunrise or a sunset or chocolate ice cream, whatever it is, small little glimmers that bring you joy. And so I did that. And it proved to be useful to me because I was in such a deep, darker depression. So I started looking for these things and noticing these things in my life and savoring them. When I saw something beautiful, a beautiful flower, I would just really take a minute and look at it and really enjoy it and use all my senses to take this beauty in. So I would say for me, I'm very goal oriented. So I frequently make lists and I keep lists on my phone of things I want to try or places I want to go. It makes me feel some sense of accomplishment to get these things done. So make lists of really small things like smile at a stranger, pick up trash in my neighborhood, call someone who might be lonely, send an old-fashioned letter to someone who you haven't talked to in a long time, pick up the phone and call someone. So these things, these little esteemable acts can help you feel better about yourself. And your goals don't always have to be lofty. They can be just alleviating the suffering or the loneliness of some person that you know or a stranger.
I love that. Maria, this has been really just, I would say, such a beautifully flowing conversation because we've talked about so many different things that I think are so important, but we don't normally have these kind of conversations about them. So I want to thank you for everything you've shared about your own life and how you approach challenges, how you deal with the different issues that you have had to ride the wave of. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. Now, one of the things I ask all of my guests is, what is your Project Loving Myself mantra that you'd like to share with our listeners? This could be something that has helped you in your own life. It's something you might believe in, or a quote that you love. What would you say?
I think my favorite quote is by Eleanor Roosevelt. Nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent.
I love that one. Yes, it's nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent.
And then one that's kind of funny that I adopted for my 60th year 2 years ago was, if my energy is too much, go find less.
And in both these quotes, what I hear you say is, it's you first, right? It's the commitment to yourself first.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's what we really talked about today is that self-commitment and how that is the most important thing in our lives. Maria, thank you for being here. How do people follow you or find out more about what you do?
Go to marialeonardolsen.com. There are links to my TEDx talks, my events, my books. I have another book coming out in about 6 months. And you can learn much more about me and get into contact with me if you'd like at marialeonardolsen.com. Follow me on social media at mariaolsen49 or at 50 after 50.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
What stayed with me from this conversation with Maria is this: happiness is not something you find, it's something you choose to create. So many of us wait for the right person, the right opportunity, or the right moment to finally feel fulfilled. But maybe the shift is this: stop waiting for life to choose you and start choosing yourself. That's what self-commitment is. As Louise Hay said, you've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. Maybe self-love begins there, with the decision to show up for yourself in a deeper way. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Follow Project Loving Myself and connect with me at Sanaya Gurnamal. Until next time, you are loved.